The way I see it is that technically we are like an experimental generation when it comes to social media. We don't want performative change. We want change that really reflects what we want to see in systems today.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Social Media for Social Impact. Today's episode is extra special because I get to introduce you to someone who's not only family, but also part of a generation that's redefining what leadership, service, and innovation look like. My guest today is Helen Zarayan, a bright Gen Z talent who is a biology major and public health minor at UCLA. Helen has already worn many hats as a researcher, healthcare volunteer, lead instructor, and student leader. From tutoring kids in math to contributing to sustainable chemistry research and supporting patients at UCLA Health, Helen's story reflects the curiosity, compassion, and drive that really capture the zeitgeist of young minds today. In our conversation today, we'll talk about her background, the values she carries into every role, and how her generation is shaping the future of impact. Helen, thank you for being here today.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Helen, you've already built an incredible mix of experiences from tutoring and research to volunteering in healthcare. Looking back, what threads connect all these roles for you?
So, I think the main commonality that all of my experience really shared is that it really is a matter of linking knowledge with care. So, for example, I'm very passionate about the life sciences. However, I also, based on all of my experience and everything that I've personally just levitated to in terms of experience, it's always been something that communicates that knowledge to people in the community. For example, I really love being parts of science organizations and doing outreach events, especially going to elementary schools, for example, and doing little science demos for kids and teaching them little concepts and really just sharing information.
That's fantastic. It's so inspiring to see you're doing all of these things, and I know you do them with so much intentionality. As part of Gen Z, you're living the values of your generation every day. Obviously, everyone is different, but if you had to describe what Gen Z and your peers care about most when it comes to creating change, what would it be?
I would say that as a generation, we definitely value and emphasize accountability. We don't want performative change. We want change that really reflects what we want to see in systems today, whether that be in sustainability or mental health and the healthcare system as a whole, for example.
That's awesome. I know you've been using social media for some of the jobs you've been working. Can you talk a little bit about the ways that you've been using social media for any of your roles? And have you seen anything shift in that over the past years?
Yeah, so just in general, growing up, social media became a very prominent part of my life as well as the lives of my peers and friends. That's something that I witnessed at school, like in middle school, for example, when like Snapchat and Instagram became a big deal. It was really in our generation, I would say, where social media has become a very popular and not so much popular, but normal form of communication. I'd say at this point, it has become a part of our mainstream culture and is deeply woven into our society. I definitely use social media on a day-to-day basis. So, for example, when I connect with old friends that have moved or relatives that live in different countries, just in general, social media has really been an engaging and fun way of keeping in touch. And even more, for example, with I'd say recently over the past few years, with the development of Musical.ly, which is now TikTok, and as well as Instagram developing Reels, those have also been really key in For example, the roles that I do, whether that is the chemistry organization that I'm a part of at school, where we try to push social media and publicity and use those social media strategies and reels and TikToks in that sense. So it's definitely very woven into my life and the experiences I've had, whether that be personal or professional.
That's awesome. I remember there was a time when you shared a campaign that was going on in your school, and I remember you were talking about different ways your peers were using social media, and really our listeners are interested in learning about how different generations are using social media for social impact, and I know you can speak on that on different levels. So, for example, at UCLA Health, you're supporting patients in a very hands-on way. What did those interactions teach you about empathy and the human side of impact?
Yeah, even before UCLA Health, whenever I'm a patient stepping into a doctor's office, I expect my physician to be very empathetic and to treat me how they would as if, I don't know, I was their relative, for example. So going into the healthcare setting, that is something I definitely kept in mind and was aware of. But when you actually go and you experience these things and you start working in healthcare and get involved with patients, even though you may have been aware of empathy, it's really also something else when you experience it. For example, there's this one patient that I recall when I was taking them in for their vitals at a doctor's office that I worked at. And their husband passed away recently, and they brought this picture of their husband, and she was very visibly mourning her husband. So, really being able to understand and be there with them, it's really not just getting vitals checked. It's not really just taking the wheelchair and taking them from patients from place to place, but it's also connecting with them and really seeing them as people, seeing them as people. Even at UCLA Health, even when I volunteer and I'm moving patients from one part of the hospital to the other, it's still a lot more than that because these patients, they just had surgery and they were just post-op, they were in recovering from a surgery and they are just now able to be transported to another part of the hospital, or I'm able to drop them off to their loved ones. So being able to really be present in that moment is a very big deal, and experiencing it firsthand, for me, it really changed me and the way I think about the healthcare system.
That's so inspirational, and I'm really proud of the work you're doing. One of the other underlying reasons I really wanted you on the podcast today is because there is this myth around Gen Z, specifically very generational stereotypes, which we really shouldn't listen to, but they make its way in the media that Gen Z is challenged in the way they build social communication skills because of their schooling during the pandemic and because of the rise of social media platforms like TikTok. And there's this notion that it's all about memes and funny dances, and there's so much noise there. What would you tell people who are having these sorts of stereotypes, and what would you want them to know about what you and your peers are doing nowadays?
The way I see it is that technically we are like an experimental generation when it comes to social media because the generations before us, they didn't have social media in middle school, for example. Me, my friends, my peers, we've all had social media of some sort ever since we were relatively young. And sure, it's really nice to have, and we do have very engaging trends. There is a lot of that, but there's also social justice, for example. So social media is like a platform for us to use to be able to speak out regarding social issues as well, or it's a way to keep updated with news and it's a way to educate ourselves as well. So it can also be an opportunity to be better educated and to be even more connected with people than we ever were before.
I 100% agree with that. And I've seen you do a lot of that work when you're posting on social media and you're doing all of the work outside of school. One of the things that to me has been very fascinating is your interest in different industries and how you're building bridges between them. If you had a magic wand and you had $1 million budget and you could dedicate that to any cause online using social media, what would be your number one priority?
Using social media. That's a good one. There's so many different, I'd say, social issues and also systemic issues that I'd love to somehow take a part in. For example, if I had $1 million, I personally have had experiences in sustainability. In the lab that I did research in was in sustainable polymer chemistry. And from that, I learned how important it is to consider sustainability and efficiency in the lab setting. And then at the same time, in the healthcare setting, there's electronic health records and AI that is being implemented in the healthcare setting. I guess I would really have to go with something that binds both efficiency, sustainability, as well as electronic health record systems and healthcare, and binds all of that together somehow to try to make healthcare more accessible and yet more efficient. I would probably focus in on increasing access of technology around the world, maybe in third world countries, as well as low income, being able to dispatch these technologies, electronic healthcare record systems throughout different hospitals that may not have the tools for it, that may be able to make some very powerful change in the healthcare system.
Brilliant. It's very promising to see that you're looking at all these different social justice issues and you're weaving them into your interests for in community health and patient health. And I know we're going to be in good hands once you graduate and become a full-time MD. I would say that one of the themes that keeps coming up as I talk to my guests is that social media can drive awareness, but it doesn't always translate into real world action. So there's a lot of businesses that are running campaigns that have good intentions behind them, but they really don't achieve the mark. If you, as a social media user, would have to say what makes a social media post effective, what makes you stop scrolling essentially on your phone, what would that be?
I would say that nowadays, with social media being deeply implemented in at least most people's lives, and with all of the features that social media has, for example, 15-second videos and like these small clips, and you can scroll literally for as long as you want. In order to have some sort of post or video that can really grab attention, it would need to be something that would stand out in a sense that the moment you see it, you'll stop because something stands out about it, whether that is the first 3 words of the video or whether that's the colors of the post being very bright red and attention grabby in that sense. Social media is, and like you said in those previous conversations that you had in different episodes of the podcast, it is really difficult to just say that, okay, we're directly going to drive action through social media because clearly social media is not a very direct and in-person approach. However, it is able to unite people and get people to unite in regards to one common social obstacle, for example. As long as the post has all of the information, the data, all of the knowledge that may be necessary for that particular subject, and it is presented in a way that is very eye-catching, whether that is with that first second of that video, or whether that's the colors of the post or just the colors in general. I feel like color is very important in this case. I think that would make all the difference.
Yeah, I agree with you. I also know that you and I have had several conversations around the American Eagle campaign,
Right.
and I am very excited to hear your perspective on the campaign they did with Sydney Sweeney and talk a little bit about how other brands have been responding. So, do you remember when you first saw the campaign and your visceral reaction to it?
Yeah, so this has caught a lot of attention in the media pretty recently. And there is a lot of influencers and people on social media that have created content regarding the American Eagle ad to express their opinions on the matter. When I saw it, I would say I was shocked, I would say, just because I personally didn't anticipate for American Eagle to come out with an ad that would use, for example, what happened really was that American Eagle launched that denim ad with Sydney Sweeney using the great line, great genes versus genes genetics. So it was really, once you see it, the headline there was Sydney Sweeney has great genes. Now that can be interpreted as either genes, like what you wear, or genetics. And then, was showing her blue eyes, her blonde hair, and I'd say classic beauty. And, the ad sparked a lot of backlash for eugenics while reinforcing white beauty standards. And I do believe that the appeal to white beauty standards was very blunt in this ad. I would say that it was shocking to me because American Eagle, I believe, did not target their usual target group. And so a while after that, Gap releases their denim ad, which featured Cat's Eye, like you said, the diverse new up and coming pop group, which was praised for inclusivity, modern appeal. And this ad was widely viewed as a response to American Eagle's brand. And so for me, it was very interesting to see how, whether it was a response or whether it was calculated or just timing wise, I'd say timing wise, it really worked out for Gap because it did boost their ad and it did become pretty viral. And that Cat's Eye ad also became pretty talked about in social media.
Yeah, it's been nonstop. Every so often, we have a campaign that backlashes entirely, and you may be too young to remember, but I remember the PepsiCo ad they did with Kendall Jenner during the Black Lives Matter movement when we were having a lot of social justice issues, and we still are in this country and beyond. And that's become one of those cautionary tales and examples of how not to run an ad. And it doesn't only backfire for the brand itself, but as you mentioned, the influencers, the celebrities, whoever is the persona that is part of that brand also experiences reputational damages. So I appreciate the fact that you have this critical view of campaigns that brands are running. And I would love to hear a little bit about what you think Gap was intending to do. Do you think this was an immediate reaction to American Eagle? Because there are some theories that say that timing wise, this couldn't have been a reaction to that ad.
Right. It really depends on whether it was actually a response or whether it was just his timing. I'm sure this could have been something that wasn't a works for a pretty long time, given the production and the choreography, and the ad seemed very. It just seems like something that would be in the works for a pretty long time. And while it may or may not have been a direct response to American Eagle's ad, it definitely was timed in a manner that made the ad more viral and gave Gap more attention. Yeah, another thing I was thinking about this was that Gap generally exhibits a more classic and timeless style, and I'd say their target group is a bit older than American Eagles, preferably those in their late 20s and millennials, while American Eagle is more targeted towards Gen Z. So maybe if this was a response of some sort, or maybe if it wasn't, maybe Gap's intention with their new ad was to bring in more Gen Z consumers. I feel like their ad was more aligned with Gen Z, given the diverse and youthful girl group Cat's Eye. The dance, especially, which became a trend on social media, with many learning the choreography of the dance and also posting themselves dancing to the song Milkshake over numerous social media platforms like Instagram, Reels, TikTok. So again, whether it was or whether it wasn't, this was definitely a very interesting marketing move. And while we have less control over the ads, we do have more control over what happens after the ad with our wallets. But yeah, that's just my take on the matter.
It's a profound take because you're absolutely right. Consumers vote with their dollars. And with all the work I've been doing with clients and purpose driven brands, we ultimately see that people are actually voting with dollars and their purchasing behavior drives production, it drives the brand's next move. What market leaders are doing ultimately affects others in the space, competitors often follow suit. And that has really been the essence of the talks that we've been having in this show because we want people to understand that there are so many different ways of making social impact. Social media is a tool to leverage, but you don't have to be a social media manager in order to use social media and make a difference in the space. And it's also about breaking some of the stereotypes or busting some of the myths that are going around social impact and social media in general. And I also appreciate having the chance to have conversations, like very raw conversations with people like you who are in this very interesting time where you, as you alluded to earlier, you grew up with social media. It's been part of your DNA, your fabric, and it's different than for those of us who had to kind of learn as we go. Now, I'm curious if you think students today feel pressure to build a personal brand online. So, for example, I know you're on LinkedIn. I know you have social media platforms, and we can link your LinkedIn in the show notes for sure. But do you feel like there's pressure among your peers to build that personal brand online? And if so, how has it evolved over time?
I'd say yes, definitely, at least throughout my life and what I've been seeing. In terms of creating a personal brand, I'd say over time that has been something that has become more prevalent among people my age, especially. I see that with my peers at school. The closer we are to graduate, we want to develop our LinkedIns and have all of our experiences on there as well, and have this very organized portfolio of all of our experiences. That's something that's very common, especially among UCLA students. So I'd say definitely it is very increasingly common to have this need to build a portfolio online of who we are as people, what we've done, and to show and demonstrate our readiness for the workforce, whether that be through establishing a LinkedIn, building a website, and really making LinkedIn specifically, as an example, more elaborative and making sure that the wording is right in our LinkedIn account. So definitely, I'd say, like I've said, it's become increasingly more common, and there has been, I wouldn't be surprised if there was a pressure to really work on that.
Absolutely. I have a personal question for you regarding personal brand building online and in general your social media habit. Have you ever taken a break from social media? And if so, did you notice anything specific?
I would say I actually have not. It's something that I've heard of when friends step out of social media and they delete their accounts for a while and then come back. I personally haven't, so I can't really elaborate on how it would feel. I've had typically when I'm on campus, for example, there is like already so much of like a social life that I have on campus when I'm on campus that I don't really tend to resort to social media. I'd say that typically I'd be more active on social media when I'm like at home for a long period of time, and I typically connect through my friend with my friends through social media. Typically on a regular school day when it's the school year's happening, I generally don't really go onto social media as much, so I haven't really felt the need to take a break.
And that makes sense and aligns with how I know you. So you've already set those boundaries and you have a very clear handle on how you use it, which is fantastic. I also know that you have worked with a lot of younger students as an instructor, and you've been teaching math, and that's been very exciting for me to see. I wanted to dive a little bit more into those experiences and what they've taught you and what the differences are you see between now your generation and then this younger generation you're tutoring.
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting topic. I was thinking about this a couple days ago. I'm still tutoring math and I do see this. So what I really realized stepping into or working in tutoring is that students there can never be a generalization of how to go about tutoring a student, especially because each and every one of them have a very different way of how to learn things. Some might be more visual learners and some might not be as much. But then even when you go into the visual learners, some of the younger students, for example, might want to work with physical blocks and manipulatives, while others would prefer drawings. And it really varies. When I start working with any student, it's really also just a matter of testing them to see how they learn and how they do their work, but also thinking to myself, okay, what approach do I think is best? The first one might not work. Okay, what is my backup option? I always need to have an open mindset as how to teach the student because the first way might not work, the second way might not work, the third might not work. It's really a matter of trial and error.
Yeah, and that's very helpful and very relatable for us higher ed folks or professors in general, because you're absolutely right. There's not one size fits all or one approach that works well. So that's very wise. And you and I have talked about this. And although we teach different generations, we know screen time is a big challenge. I'd love to hear whether devices and screen time is affecting how your students are learning.
I would say that it does. I would say the more screen time that a student might have, the more that might affect their work habits, their attention span, possibly even their behavior. I personally prefer that if I would be instructing students, I would do so with pencil and printed paper. Therefore, there is less opportunity for distraction. At the same time, every student is different. Some might find it more efficient to work on an iPad, for example, while others, it may be more important for them to grab the pencil and to write on paper and not have any potential distractions. So it really depends on a student to student basis. I personally, in terms of tutoring younger students, would prefer the good old pencil and paper.
That's so funny too, because we talk about social media as a force for good, but it's important to have honest conversations around social media platforms and how the algorithms are designed. And they are designed in a way to keep you engaged and on the platform. So that's where the whole concept of doom scrolling originated. And it's important to just realize that all these different professions that we hold and the different hats we wear, there are a lot of opportunities to use social media as a way to advance, and even with developments of tools like Gen AI and so on. But then we also have the flip side of it where we have a lot of pushback as people working in social media or with the big tech platforms, because there is a lot of scrutiny around how these algorithms are built. So I appreciate the insight you have there. And I know we could be talking about a million different topics, but I really want to learn and conclude today's show by learning about what your future goals are. Where would you like to be in 5 years from now? And what is your advice to those who are on this path and doing all these amazing things, but also knowing it's a lot? Where do you want to be in 5 years? And what advice do you have for others who are listening?
In 5 years, I would like to be towards the end of my medical school career, heading into residency. That is the first thing that I see for myself because that's the way for me to become a physician and to become an empathetic one, to become one that connects with patients, not just relaying information and recommendations, but also doing so in a caring manner and doing so in a way that makes sense to the patient, being very open-minded and culturally inclusive. That's a very big deal to me. So in terms of my future, that is what I see for myself. As for looking into the past as something, in terms of advice, something that really stood out to me, especially as a person who I don't have any siblings or my parents didn't go to school in this country and didn't go through the American college application process and everything. So what I look back to is grappling in high school with all the AP courses and applying to colleges, and that did not work out for me the way I'd liked initially. So I went to community college for 2 years and then I transferred. So I would like to say for those who are younger, who may still be in high school, for example, that if you don't get in the first try, it is okay. I personally freaked out about it a lot, but it is okay. I transferred and now I'm at my finishing my last going into my last year at my dream school. I would just say keep going, keep challenging yourself, taking the courses that challenge you, courses that you're intrigued about, even if you think that they might be, oh, this might be very difficult, this might put a dent in my GPA. If this is something you're passionate about and if you time everything, schedule everything correctly, and have everything organized, then you're all set to go, really. There's nothing that you can't do. For I think a big deal for me going through undergrad, especially at UCLA, is telling myself that there is no class that is too hard. I can take the class and I can survive it with an A. So it's very possible, is what I'm trying to say, and that there's never an end in the road. You just keep going. There'll be new avenues for you to explore if, that ever happens.
This is such solid life advice. Helen, thank you so much for joining me today. Your story is so inspiring. And what I really take away from this conversation is the reminder that impact isn't waiting until you have a title. It's really about the choices you make along the way and the communities you serve and the courage to imagine something better. So, for listeners, I hope Helen's perspective encourages you to look at the energy, curiosity, and care that this generation is bringing into every space, from labs and classrooms to hospitals and beyond. I'm so proud of you, Helen. I can't wait to see what you do next. To everyone tuning in, thank you for listening to Social Media for Social Impact. Keep questioning, keep learning, and keep using your gifts to drive change. Until the next time.